Good morning, everybody. This is we're going to get started on time, and what I'd prefer for everyone to do is I'm going to speak for an hour because this is a really long subject. I could have split it up into a lot of different sections. So I'll take questions at the end, and what I'd prefer if you just write a question down as it comes into your head, and then save it for the end. And I'll be happy to answer everybody's questions. So also, my voice is not usually like this, and it's not the result of me staying out late. It was the result of somebody giving me a cold. I'm not sure who it was. So anyway, if I keep clearing my throat, I'm sorry. And if people will start clearing their throats in the audience, and I apologize for that. So, wham. Producing audio for Halo. My name's Martin O'Donnell. And I'm the audio director for Bungie Studios. And we're just going to go through the whole thing as quickly as possible. I'm going to give you a little history on how Halo came to be at the state it's at, and also then some hands-on nuts and bolts stuff, somewhat of an overview, but I'm going to try to get into a few details. The first thing I want to mention is that as you all know, doing a huge project is a gigantic collaborative effort, so there's no way one person can do it by themselves, besides all the programmers and artists at Bungie, which were absolutely tremendous, and the designers, of which there are a few here today. Bungie guys, just raise your hands. Yes, let's do a hand clap for them. We also had Jay Wineland, who was a sound design guy that worked side by side with me through the basically 4 months of just hellish crunch. It was the worst crunch I've been on. I've only shipped 6 titles, so I don't know how bad they can be, but this was the worst because it was a launch title. Matt Segur was the programmer extraordinaire who devoted much of his time to just programming the audio engine, basically to my specs. He never really quite revealed how much he was actually doing to my specs, but it turned out pretty good. Mike Salvatore is my former partner who did a lot of engineering in Chicago and did some of the voice engineering for me while I was even on the phone from Redmond, and contributed some of the composition. Adam Tooze, who gets a smaller font because he was he was an intern, and actually he was very invaluable. About the last 2 months of the project, he came in and just chopped up so many thousands of pieces of things. So let's go through a quick bit of history. I'm going to try to get through this quickly. In 1998, we finished Myth 2, which was, the last one. Seemed like a big crunch to me. It was we got that game out the door, and as we were finishing it at the end of '98, Jason Jones, who's the lead programmer at Bungie, showed me some initial stages of the next big project he wanted to do. At the time, it was called Blam, and which is just a term we use around the office. At that point, I was still, by the way, just my own production company, Total Audio, which was just around the corner from Bungie. So Jason showed me the early stages of this game, which basically was on the Myth engine. It looked a lot like Myth. It was sort of an RTS meshy looking thing, except that it had some vehicles. And what ended up happening is that it ended up turning into some really vast outdoor environments. There was a cyborg and some aliens. And then the Jeep that came in just kept getting better and better, and we all started enjoying driving the Jeep so much that I think the concept was switched from sort of a God view RTS kind of a structure to a first-person, third-person game. At E3 in 1999, oh yes, after the January distraction. In January of that year, my studio burned completely to the ground. And so next year I was thinking of giving a talk on the importance of making off-site backups. I don't know if any of you would be willing to, yeah. So also the different kinds of insurance that you should all have. Yeah. There's a thing called business interruption insurance. Has anybody heard about that? Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. So anyway, after the E3, after the January distraction, which is one of those life-changing events, but that's another story. For E3 1999, Bungie wanted to show a press, behind closed doors, a press event to show Halo at the early stages. It was a tech demo. Of course, Halo was a tech demo for a really long time, believe it or not. And all I did for that was I gave a lot of one-off sounds for weapons and aliens and tanks and different things. It was just enough to, as they were showing the thing behind closed doors, if they shot the gun, it would just blow everybody away, or suddenly the Jeep would make a noise. There was really very little sound design. Although we were experimenting with some really neat 3D sound that at that point we were supporting both the Creative and Oriole 3D sound cards, and we were doing some really fun stuff with that. So that was the beginning of the 3D sound, knowing that we're going to have to support that. Now we go up to Macworld New York, which was July of 1999. Joe Staten, who's the director of Bungie Cinematics, came to me and said, "Hey, Marty, we got this is July," and he said, "We've got this great opportunity to show Halo at Macworld New York with Steve Jobs introducing it in his keynote address." And I said, "Great, when is that?" And he says, "Next Monday." So it was like, it was actually on a Wednesday, but they had to be on the plane that Monday. So it was a bit of a panic, but I did see an opportunity. And for all the musicians here, how many people are composer, musician guys? All right, great. You know that you're always looking for an opportunity to get your stuff shown in some way that is really good. And I did commercials for 18 years, and the commercials sound great in the studio, and on television they're just really. So when we would have little shows of commercial music, sometimes it would be great. We'd have these big auditoriums with giant screens and speakers, and we'd mix all the voiceover out and just show the music, and people were like, "Wow, I didn't know you guys did that." And so I knew instantly that, because I'd been to a few Macworlds, and I knew that the Steve Jobs Smoke and Mirrors machine was going to be great, and it would be a really great place to have some music and sound play. And the thing we knew was that Steve Jobs is our friend at that point. Okay. So the thing I asked Joe about, I said, "Okay, what do we want to do here? We don't have much time. We have to make an impact." The Mac engine at that point was just showing OpenGL. It was a real-time 3D graphic show. But we had no sound support for the Mac at that moment. So there was none of the sound design we had done so far was going to be able to make it. So it was like, it's okay with me. It's just music. This is a great opportunity. All of you know how powerful visuals and music can be all by themselves, especially with a captive audience. So I wanted to know what the story was that was going to be told. It was a pretty robust scripting system for the graphics, in terms of like the player goes here and the Jeep goes there and things happen. And the general story was just, Cyborg runs out of this thing, and it sort of starts slow and spooky, and then a bunch of action happens for a long time, and he's being chased, blah, blah, blah. And then it's sort of, he's victorious, but there's this beauty shot on the hill, and I said, "Well, how long is it going to be?" And he says, "Well, 2 or 3 minutes." I said, "Well, can you get any closer? I have to actually produce this now." So... So it was. What I knew I had to do was A, fast, slow, fast, or slow, fast, slow, and make it so if he came back to me and said it's 2 minutes, I would just sort of go like that, and if it was 3 minutes, I'd go like that. So the first thing was that he said, "I think it needs to have some sort of ancient feel. This is an ancient artifact, this ring," and so I thought this would work. There you go, Gregorian chant. Gives you sort of an ancient feel, and plus it's shmushy. You can move it around. He said, and plus we want this to be really cinematic. We want it to feel like it's a big epic thing. And so I thought, okay, we need to. So that's, and this is the way I work because I come from the jingle business, and this is the way we work. That's Chicago Symphony string players who are studio musicians in Chicago. They all got beepers. They come in at the last minute. And I think there are 8 strings that you're hearing there. So I do a lot of layering. So 8 passes on the first, 8 passes on the, first of easy, second of easy, change where you are on the bow, play up here, change chairs, do some stuff. What's actually nice about that is that the resulting Pro Tools session is just clean with separated tracks that then I can extract just the cellos later, and there's no other violins, there's nothing else in the room but just the cellos playing, because that's how I laid them up. So what I usually do on something like that, not obviously, I do a MIDI track first to, sketch it out and get it timed the way I like it, and then I print it out, edit it, and get the players to play. Usually what will happen is they'll play with the track a little bit, almost like a click, and then I'll take it out of their headphones, because then it's always more exciting for them to just be playing, hearing themselves. And then in the final mix, I decide how much support I want to bring back in. The third goal of this little movie from Macworld was this alien feel. So here's my alien feel. Okay. So I call that quality chant. And hey, you want to hear some? We're going to do some interactive dynamic music right here. That's not where it actually went, but hey, you can almost throw that any place, and it sort of screws everything up. All right, so that's what we ended up doing. And like I said before, when you have a venue with big rooms, big speakers, the goal was I didn't want anybody to come out of there thinking, oh, this sounded like game music. And what that means is, who knows what game music sounds like. But people have a vision of what game music is, and part of it is just because they're playing a game. And so this was a movie, this was a cinematic event, and I wanted it to be like that. The next thing that happened then, we fast forward another, 8 months, we're up to E3 2000. The thing we wanted to do was do another demo for people. We had a captive audience. We wanted to recreate what we knew was successful. We got a lot of good buzz and press off the Macworld show, and we realized that what we needed to do is build a theater, put the big screen in, and this time I wanted to up it to surround sound. So we were upping the ante. I wanted the music and the effects, the whole thing to be produced as close to a movie event as we could. So when people came into the thing, and you know how it is at E3, you're just being bombarded with stuff. If we could put you in an enclosed environment and bombard you even worse. But it was the idea of a captive audience. The first thing that happened in that was a live demo showing the gameplay, and that once again simply had very simple sound effects. And immediately after the demo, containing one-off sounds. Then for the 10-minute long DVD that we made, it was totally a cinematic audio approach. It was we had storyboards, and once again, this was capturing real-time gameplay. It was not using Maya and rendering something out. It was actually these guys scripted the game engine. We just captured video. And then we cheated on the audio. We just post-scored the entire thing. So I had storyboards, we had scripts, we had actors, we did a nice casting session, and it was a really great post-production session. And just as an aside, we were talking about mixing 5.1. That was one of my first experiences in actually mixing music in 5.1. And because we brought in an orchestra again, or orchestral strings again, and I had all these different passes. So when we got down to mixing, I'm like, oh, let's try this. First violins, first pass in this speaker, and second pass in the rear speaker, and the violas over here, and the cellos here, and stuff. And I sat there and listened to it in the middle of the room, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm right in the middle of the string section. I can hear the guys, Rosin, and this guy making a mistake, and this sucks. I mean, I went right from how cool is this to no, this is horrible. No one wants to be in the middle of the string section. You want to be in the audience. So I learned pretty quickly that there's a reason why music for the most part needs to be coming from the stage. And so anyway, that was just a very quick learning experience. Oh, and guess who was at the E3 2000 thing? Microsoft came in. I had just started working from Bungie. I had been a freelance contractor, and during the 10 days that I was working on the DVD, I had officially started May 1st that year as Bungie's audio director. And 10 days later, we went to E3, showed the DVD, and Alex Seropian, who owned Bungie at the time, said, "Hey, Marty, guess what? Microsoft just bought us." So the deal is they basically made us an offer we couldn't refuse. And it really was a great offer, because anybody who was here a couple years ago seeing Bill Gates talk about the Xbox, I was excited about it. It seemed like finally there was a platform that might be consistent, that might actually give us high-fidelity sound, high-fidelity graphics, and be in people's living room. And frankly, if you're an audio guy, I mean, do you want to be in somebody's office or do you want to be in somebody's living room? I mean, I don't know. I wanted to be in the living room. Plus, we were offered to be a launch title. They said, "You come out, we'll buy you, and we will let you be one of the launch titles for the Xbox," which is a great exposure. It's also, I learned later, that it's hard to be a launch title. Okay, so in July of 2000, we moved to Redmond. Basically, when they saw what the Xbox could do, all the tech demos and all the code at that point, Jason Jones is the kind of guy, as a lead programmer, who said, "Yeah, we can do so much more, so there's no porting here at all. We throw everything out." As far as I know, I don't know if any of the Bungie guys can support me on this, I think everything was thrown out, right? All the art assets too? Or was it just, conceptual drawings started over again, and I don't know, but there was a lot of stuff. Jamie, what do you say?
Most of that was redone.
Okay. So programming, art, everything was redone. It was pretty scary. So I wasn't able to start the audio at all until March of 2001, and this is for a November launch in 2001. I was finishing up Oni, which was part of the deal, so that we could be bought by Microsoft. They had to make good on Oni, and so we finished Oni, and that was a lot of work. Plus, then they had us. One of the conditions, at least my conditions for going to Redmond, was that we were going to build our own studios on site, right there with the artists and the programmers and everything else. So we have a nice music studio, an isolation booth, and Avid video room. So, okay, now we're going to go into the overview for Halo Audio. The first thing we did was we wrote up a document that just put the goals. These are pretty general goals for audio in general that I've come up with over the years. Audio needs to just make sure that the first thing it has to do is it has to set the right mood for the game. Whatever you're doing as you're playing it, the mood has to be right. It has to convey information. Certain things just have to tell you what's going on, and audio is one of the good places to do it. It's a virtual world, so we're trying as hard as we can to make things seem totally alive and as real as possible. And on the sound effects side, the most important thing for me is that people, when they play the game, when they hear a sound, that at the minimum it sounds totally real. They can't imagine it. They don't have to think, "Oh, what was that supposed to represent? Oh, that's that thing." It's just instantly the sound effect goes with what they're seeing. Sometimes it needs to just inform the player. Are you dying? Are you getting health? Whatever it is. Some of those things are just gameplay elements. It also inform the player that there's an alien behind you, or you just killed the head elite guy and all the grunts are running away, which is a really fun thing, by the way. There are things that are seen and unseen that audio can inform people of. And this is actually, I learned this on Riven, where we had a huge machine, and it came down and chunked into place, and then these two little bolts came out. And all I saw was this little thing. So it was like a little thing. And the art director, called me up and said, "Oh, Marty, those two bolts, they represent this huge pneumatic thing with pipes going back 200 feet in every direction." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I don't see any of that." But we were able to create the illusion that that was happening by making a hugely big sound, which is kind of fun because, as we all know, audio can do things that no one is seeing, and you think you're seeing it. So these two little pixels coming out suddenly turn into huge things. And on the dialogue side, we basically want to make sure we unfold the story, and it provides characterization. And one of the ways we did that, for example, is not just the characterization for the main characters, but we knew there was going to be a lot of marine AIs that would be with you, and it was very stereotyped. But we knew that in the midst of combat, we didn't want to have every Marine have the same voice. And, in the tradition of all sorts of World War II movies and Saving Private Ryan and everything else, we got the Italian, we got the Hispanic, we got I forget what else we got. Australian. Oh, but that was good, because he came out of the blue. It was an Australian guy that auditioned, and he didn't have an Australian accent when he was auditioning. But when we just talked to him, he was obviously an Aussie, and so we're like, no, do that. That's perfect. So on the music side, this is just my philosophy, and I think it pertains pretty much to the kinds of games I like to work on. So this is not even my philosophy about other kinds of games, but I really believe that in music, less is more, and silence is golden. So there is no silence in Halo, because there's always ambient sound, and there's always sound effects. So the silence is when music is not playing, for me. And my reason for that is I think music has to convey emotion and has to be dramatic. And if it turns into wallpaper, it's really, really hard to get any kind of dramatic pop out of music. I just don't know how you do it. It has to be an emotional underscore for times when you're playing in the game and times when there are cutscenes. So I've said this one before, and I should maybe put a little copyright next to it. But for me, and this is a real simplistic way of saying it, because sounds also can make you feel, obviously. But for the most part, sound makes it real, makes the world real, and music is what makes you feel. So that's the way I remember it. So on the linear audio side, which is all we had done up till now for the most part, for the tech demos and for the movies and stuff, it's linear audio obviously is pre-mixed. There's a predetermined duration. We used all the traditional audio post-production techniques. And we also get the opportunity to have a thing called a final mix. And we've been talking about that amongst the different audio groups over the last few days. And I really think this is great, because this has been something I have been preaching since the day I got into games, which is only in 1996. And I come from many years in the other side of the business, where in movies, and Jeremy and everybody else who has done any scoring, I mean, there is no more important moment in the life of a movie than the final mix. That's when the director comes. That's when, if you're invited to the final mix, you feel special. You actually might even put a tie on. It's a really big deal. I mean, it's costing thousands of dollars an hour. I mean, that's when everybody is there. And the reason it's called final is because there's no other moment. That's it. That's the final thing. The final mix is when everything comes together, and that's when these guys who are re-recording mixers are unbelievably talented. And in the game field, I will talk about, I remember doing Riven, and I said, so when's the final mix? And they're like, what are you talking about? And it took me a while to understand that there just isn't a moment in the post-production of games where anybody, for the most part, is even thinking about that concept of final mix. And part of it, I think, is because the game mixes itself every time somebody plays. That's the final mix, because you don't know what might happen. Somebody might throw 10 grenades and walk over here to the beach, and that's when the final mix is happening. It's happening in real time. So I've finally been able to figure out what I consider dynamic audio, which is audio that responds in some way to the game. And when it comes to the final mix, it's what are the things we learn in mixing in movies that we can do dynamically. So a dynamic sound responds to a condition or event in the game. It can respond to what's happening in the environment, and we now can use DSP, digital signal processing, for that because of the chip on the Xbox and other chips, obviously. It's spatially located. This is something just as simple as the sound is placed there and it changes in your ears because of where it is. It's dynamic. And dynamic music, okay, so this is, once again, I think we're doing a lot better as a community understanding how to get better and better at dynamic audio, sound design, dialogue, some of these other things. We're working well at that. Dynamic music is tough, and I think even the aesthetic has not really been, we're still experimenting with it. It's still a young field, and there's so many different techniques. And for me, when I say dynamic music, you know that it's going to be a piece of music that might be longer or shorter based on conditions. It might be louder or softer based on conditions. It might have some sort of variable intensity based on the conditions. So to me, those are the most important things about dynamic music. My problem is that, and Jeremy's talked about this too, is that I don't want to be so dynamic that we turn into a Warner Brothers cartoon, so that it was like, oh, here we go, up the stairs, dun 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 dun. Oh, now we're going down the stairs, dun 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 dun. And then what's the gamer going to do? I mean, talk about like breaking that fourth wall, breaking the immersion. They're like, oh, okay, I'm doing the dun 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 dun. Oh, cool. Oh, look what I can do. Hey, I can make the music go up and down. Watch this. It's like, well, what game are you making? Are you making a music game? Are you making Parappa the Rapper? Because that's great. Make that. But in a game like Halo or any story-driven dramatic game, I'm really reluctant to do things where people could notice that they're affecting the music. The way we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I mean, it works so well in films. Music tells the audience how they should be feeling at any given time, and for the most part, they don't know that they're being told how they should feel. But if they suddenly feel like, oh, I can make myself feel tense. Oh, I can make myself feel happy. It's like, now you've changed the game. You've got a different game. And so that's my little spiel on dynamic music. So dynamic audio, and people are clearing their throats because of me. I'm sorry. I should have salt water. Dynamic dialogue also responds to a condition or event. The characters in your game actually will respond to what they see and hear, how they feel. And, Chris Butcher and Jamie Griesmer, I'm sorry, Jamie. Griesmer, okay, are giving a speech today. I'll talk today at 2 o'clock. And it's on the AI in Halo, which, by the way, I think is really, really good. And I'm probably giving them way too much credit to say that they see and hear and feel, but to me they did. So they're giving a talk on how they make the AI come alive in Halo, and they were really, really important, especially with the dialogue. So now on the audio engine side, I know this is getting all kind of dry. I'm going to move into some fun stuff soon. In Halo, the main currency is, just like everybody else, is the sound file. Everything's recorded. There is no MIDI. So it's just WAV files. That's the lowest level of detail. The Halo engine only responds to what we call the sound tag. And the sound tag is just basically multiple sound files and instructions on how to play those sound files. Within each sound tag, there will be multiple permutations of that event. And there will be weighted permutations. So if I have 10 things in a list of footsteps, or 20, actually I think the footsteps are, we have at least 20 or 30 footsteps for every kind of footstep. So we will have all those permutations plus basically just a number next to it. That's all we have to do. So if there's a little scuffly footstep and I'm playing through and it's like, I'm hearing that too much, I go back in and say, skip that one 90% of the time. So it basically chooses whatever footstep it wants randomly and can skip anything in some relationship. It's real simple. But this basic structure of a sound tag with randomized permutations is the core of what we do in Halo for almost everything.
What do you mean by permutations?
Permutations just means Well, I mean, it's like footstep 1, footstep 2, footstep 3. So it's versions of a footstep on grass, versions of a footstep on gravel. To me, it's like, oh, wow, listen to this explosion I just made. Isn't it incredible? Yeah, but it's not incredible 90,000 times in a row. There is no sound that stands up to repetition. It just is no sound that stands up to repetition. And, I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. So the concept of, especially with Jay or Adam, if I would say, hey, can you work on this thing? Here's some elements, make this sound. And then especially Adam was great because he was a young intern and he was so excited to actually be making something. And he would say, wow, look what I made. And it would take him a really long time to make it. And I would listen to it. It's like, yeah, that's a little too crunchy. That's a little too this. Change this. And he would, fix it. And I'd listen to it. Yeah, that's really good. I need 20 more just like that. And he would be shocked. And it's like, yeah, it's good. I need 20 more just like that. Because it's going to be used in the game so much that it has to have some randomization. Now, we had other ways of randomizing, which I'll get into a little bit later. Music, once again, less is more. Here's the deal. This is my deal. Let's say the average person plays Halo, and if they like it, it might take them 20 hours to get through. I don't like any music for 20 hours. There is no music that I like for 20 hours. My most favorite music I don't want to hear for 20 hours. So to me, it's a matter of, can I figure out a way of producing about 80 minutes of music, was what ended up being in Halo, that can somehow cover 20 hours. Which means there might even be less music in Halo than in some big Hollywood epics right now. There's a return in some Hollywood films where there's even more music than there used to be. And I think, games can probably stand to have a lot of music. Maybe 80 minutes was not as much as we should have had. But the point is that I want to figure out how to use I didn't want 20 hours of music. I just think that would be horrible. It would be impossible for me anyway. So basically, I still think the best music is essentially linear. I don't know how to tell. I'm an old guy, so I don't know how to tell a musical story that doesn't basically take a little trip somehow. It's got a beginning, it's got a middle, it's got an end. There's a little climax here. There's, it's linear. A melody is linear. So knowing that I have to make something linear that I like, but then think, okay, eventually it's going to have to be dynamic in its execution, in its implementation. So that to me was the puzzle to try to figure out. And I think I'm getting close for myself to figuring out some ways of doing it. And just as an aside here, some really important people in Hollywood are called music editors. And after the composer and the director, and they've done all this stuff, and they've conducted the orchestra to the picture, and they've got this great score for this scene that's 3 minutes long. Orchestra goes home, everybody's happy, and the director goes, I hate the way that shot looks. I'm going to take 30 seconds off of this thing. Well, orchestra's gone. The composer's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Well, music editor comes in and goes, oh, I could just cut on this beat and shove this over here. Hey, it's just music. And any composer knows, if we're honest with ourselves, if you've ever listened to something that a music editor's done, or if you've ever had to edit your own music to fit something at the last minute, you can be all prima donna-ish, which is one of my goals, actually. People at Bungie know. How dare you change my music? But a lot of times you go, oh, gee, that worked out pretty good. That worked pretty good at cutting on the beat there and shoving that. I like that melody better. But you don't want to admit it, but it happens. And a good music editor is unbelievable with this stuff. So to an extent, what I needed to have is a game which had a dynamic music editor in it. So if a scene goes a little longer, there's some little music editor inside the game that says, oh, I'll extend this and I'll cut this on the beat, and there we go. So what I did was I sat with the designers of each level, and at basically the last minute. But anyway, and I had a spotting session. So those of you know how many people know what a spotting session is? Okay, a spotting session, a lot of you do. So a spotting session is usually you'll sit with the director on a film and basically go through and either take down frame counts or even just say what's important in this scene. And the director will say, well, this is happening here, and then at this point, I want the thing to get really intense because it's an important whatever. And so you're spotting with the director, and the designers are the ones, the level designers are the ones who know what's happening in a level. Now, the levels in Halo are not necessarily linear like a movie, but there are events that happen. You know, you can wander around and you can do this thing, but eventually you sort of need to do this other thing here, and then this, you know, all hell breaks loose. So I want to know when they had important moments in the game, and I went through it with them and took notes, and that's how I figured out where I thought music should go. And just to back up, when one of the designers, who shall remain nameless, way early in the project said, well, hey, Marty, you're going to write music, right? And I was like, yeah. And he said, well, you know, we need battle music, we need walking around music, and we need, you know, tension music. And I'm like, you know, I was going to say his name. Let's pretend his name is John. I mean, that's just a name. I said, John, I don't do that. I want to do it so I know when the important parts are. I don't want it to be that every time Jaws comes up, you hear the because the coolest part in Jaws was when Jaws came up and the music didn't tell you he was coming up. So if you just hardwire into a game, every time bad guy comes, play this music, where's the tension? Where's the fun? So he said, well, that's going to be a lot harder to do. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. So let's just, you know, sack up and do that thing. Okay, woohoo, some examples. Okay, now speaking of battle music, here's a very simple implementation of this concept. What I have up here now is Peak. I've got a playlist, which is how I would experiment with music that I had recorded and then maybe remixed in some way so I thought it might fit and be editable. So I'll just play a little bit of it. It's pretty repetitious, and we'll play through it. Okay, so you see how it's going to go. First thing I do is I'll take these loops, and here's loop 1. Now remember that in the sound tag I can have multiple loops, because there are multiple files, and I can assign a number to them. So I can say, when you get done with loop 1, hey, yeah, maybe you'll play loop 1 again. Or maybe you'll go to loop 2, or maybe you'll go to loop 3. As a matter of fact, go to loop 3 50% of the time, less than the rest. Skip loop 3 50% of the time, because loop 3's got a little more something interesting in it. And all that does is just give me an easier way to extend that particular mood. So for loop 1, you just heard it. So as you see, it's going back and looping. Okay, simple. The basic way that I was able to, all I had to do was talk to the designers and then give them what I wanted. Play this piece starting here, and then when this happens, play Alt. Or if this happens, stop. And if you call stop while you're playing Alt, it'll play the Alt stop. Or we could set it up where it would instantly go to an Alt, or it would crossfade to an Alt, or it would say, I'm on this loop. When I get to the end of this loop, I'm going to go to the Alt. You see the 3 differences there? It's pretty simple, but it gives you it's amazing how much it can give you. Plus, if I have the ability of saying, I'm playing piece A, and when the cool, scary thing happens, play Stinger B. And it's a string swell that just happens, and piece A just keeps playing, but Stinger B just plays over it. I mean, that seems pretty simple, but it works really well. And if you've designed it to work, I mean, hey, you know, sometimes things are more dissonant than you thought. And it's like, well, okay, that's what I planned. I wanted it to be dissonant. By the way, I take credit for everything. So, and as another aside, how many guys have scored a scene and you get credit for cueing things visually that you never did? Well, trust me, take credit for it. Yeah, I planned on hitting that emotional moment with that string part. Yeah. Okay. I mean, if they think you did, don't say, gosh, what a surprise. So, so in this particular alt case, what's nice, too, about this little system was all I had to have the designers do is put in those simple commands. Start, stop. Start alt. Was there any other command, Jamie? I can't remember. I think that was it. So, and of course, one of the other things that was very important and unfortunately didn't always get implemented, although it was supposed to, was some sort of time limit. Because if a player is like really lame and just keeps spinning around looking at their feet, you know, it's like, okay, 5 minutes has gone by, fade the music out. Because if they're that bad, we don't have to torture them by making them hear this music forever and ever. And that actually worked pretty good. When I watched my dad play, I mean, it's like, wow, you know, he never got any of those alts. He never got any of that good tension stuff happening because he was so bad, the music just went away. So anyway. So the alt version of this piece is, I wonder if this is it, yeah. So obviously it could keep going. So there is, in this, the way I then would check to see if all this is working. First of all, I check to see that all the loops work with themselves. And then it's like, okay, boy, I hope this works. I check to see if they work in any order. And that's, you know, sometimes I anticipate, you'd be surprised how well things work just because you cut on a beat. I mean, you know, it does. And obviously you can see some of these loops are relatively long. So let's say Alt 2 comes in right after loop 1. So sometime during loop 1, and remember loop 1 could be playing 4 minutes into the tune. It could be playing 4 minutes later because it was called again. And so I would test each one of these out. And this playlist version in Peak made this really easy for me. So I could just go and I need to go. I'm going to hold your ears for a second. Okay, here it comes. Cool. Now, so what I did with this tool is I just checked every possible combination, knowing that if somebody was running through this one section and then we wanted to get to that next level of intensity, we would call the alt. Now, if it needed to be something that that next level of intensity needed to be something that cued directly with the event, I would either do a quick crossfade or just bring in another piece right on top of it. If it was just something like I knew we were crossing into the next level of intensity, the music didn't change until it was done with this thing. There was this like 10-second, 12-second, who knows, sort of smushy pad. But who cares? The player says, wow, you know, it changed at some point. And they, in their heads, think that it's in sync. You know what I'm saying? I'll take credit for that. So it's like there are times when things, if you could just write your questions down.
I was just going to comment on what you're saying. I played through the whole game, and I love this game. And me being a musician, I always focus on the music, and what's the matter, you didn't even notice.
Which part didn't you notice?
The transitions and stuff.
Oh, okay, good.
Something was going on, but I wouldn't notice when it happened. It was done exceptionally well.
Well, thank you. That was one of the things I was hoping to do. So, and there were times, it's just funny, I mean, I'll see some people play the game and it's like they'll just never get to the alt. They were just so bad the music fades out. And at one point with one of the designers, I remember him saying, gee, you got this cool tension build-up part, but, you know, the way I play it, it only lasts for about 8 seconds and then it goes right into this, you know, exciting thing. And I said, well, great. I mean, I have a really long tension build-up thing for those people who take a real long time to get to the exciting part. So for you, the movie is scored that way. For them, the movie is scored the other way, and it's two different experiences. And both people, I hope, feel like it was customized for them, without really noticing that I was manipulating something. Hopefully. And you know what? Frankly, yeah, this sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, obviously. But it was fun. Oh, come on. Feet don't fail me now. It's interesting. We're struggling. All right, so that's this. How are we doing on time? Crap. I'm just going to give you one more. I knew this was going to take too long. So this is another piece done the same way. A little more obnoxious piece. Percussion for the main loop. And by the way, for those we were talking about looping stereo files, I think Peak does a really nice job. Excuse me. So there's a loop, and that's one of the loops. And then the alt loop is this. Like, oh God, how am I going to do that? This guitar player had no idea I was going to be looping anything. So, hey, okay, that kind of works. How does those alt loops actually fit with each other? Is it possible to go from that, let's say, alt 3 to alt 4? Well, yeah, of course it does, because that was... There's that guy again. See, that's what's nice about having that isolated. You're like, oh, I'll throw that in. Okay. Well, does Alt 4 work after Alt 1, just in case the game calls it that way? Yeah, sure, why not? I might have written it that way. And besides, you know, there's a lot of explosions happening at this moment, so... And during that alt, actually this was sort of a fun piece. It was, it had the ability to go back and forth. So the designer could say, start. If these conditions are happening, start alt. And if the conditions go back to a different thing, stop alt. Or what was it we had to do? That was what it, stop alt. And what stop alt did was go back to the original one. Go back to the one that's not so complex. And so you could go back and forth between these conditions. The loud, raucous guitar player with the quali guy, and or just the percussion. And it could go back and forth and sort of sustain whatever was happening. And if during the just percussion part and the stop is called, he's there too. So that's the stop. And you know, when I've seen people play this game, boy, that stop seems to hit something. You know, they just landed on something, or they just killed the thing, or whatever it is. It's just like, whoa, you know, and I'm like, yeah, all right. I planned it that way. And so here, for example, is Alt 3. If the call to stop the, if a stop is called during the Alt, how about that? So not everything has to fade out. And, having nice endings can really feel good. And sort of having some sort of fake slammed-on ending doesn't feel very good. The other thing I like about what we did in Halo as a design is that we didn't make a big deal out of dying. Because you die a lot in Halo. And, I won't mention any other games here, but if every time you die you hear this piece of music and this screen comes up and somebody yells, Chief! 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 So anyway, what's cool about Halo is that whenever you die, everything fades out over about a second, and boom, you're right back to whatever the last point was, and everything picks up again. So you can say, yeah, I didn't really die, I'm okay, I'm going forward, I've learned something. And I just really am glad we didn't make a big deal out of the death. There is no death music here. There's intense music, there's spooky music. Okay. Let me just show one more quick thing. And this is in reference to ambience. Obviously, I use the exact same tool for ambient sounds. And what you're going to hear right now is a combination spooky music, spooky ambience. So just imagine if this was, the sounds of the beach with wind and seagulls and blah, blah, blah. This is how we did it. So it's pretty simple, just spooky stuff. So what's fun about this is that it actually loops pretty well. So every one of those loop points for how many loops I had, or 8 loops, is the same. So I already know that it will always loop on itself. And then I can cut the whole middle section out of here. I could say, let's cut this out with a little blending. Let's insert some other thing in here and make the whole thing a little shorter. So loop 3 is shorter and has this other effect that comes in. And I can make as many of these kind of loops as possible. And it's fun just to listen to it in the game to see how the game itself recombines these things. So imagine this is you can see the first one was about 30 seconds. This is 22 seconds. It's got some other elements in it. So to me, it's just the whole idea of randomizing this stuff. As long as your ear cannot say, oh, here, that crow's going to caw right after the gravel hits. Yeah, there it is. I've done loops that were, a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, and still the ear picks up on the repetition. It's just amazing. So the only way I can figure out to make it so you don't pick up on it is to have multiple loops, which with random lengths and random calls. In this particular case, on this one, the alt is, oops, that's not the alt. It's got this pulsing, scary, blah, blah thing happening. So for this, it's nice because I say, while the original loop is happening, when the call is made to go to the scary music, or the more intense one, the alt, it instantly crossfades into it. So that actually happens in sync with something. All right, let's go back to the presentation. La la. I'm going to just zip through. Sound effects, so ambient sound tags, interpolate all that, blah, blah, blah. The other thing about the ambient sound tags we're able to do is put detail sounds in, especially in the 5.1 space. So we could, in the beach, for example, waves, wind, and seagulls, and something dripping, and something whatever. And it would just be these detail sounds, just one-off sounds that will happen within this area, and randomly volume, randomly pitch shift, and randomly be placed. So it just works really nice. I love my programmers. But I could do it if I had time. Because Brian said I took COBOL when I was... All right. So these are things that are attached. We attach sounds to geometry, objects, and spheres. Impulse sound tags. These are the things that are either interruptible, like a gunshot. A single gunshot might have multiple permutations, and they might also have fall off on them, some sort of ring out. So if the person just shoots once, a natural ring out. If they hold the trigger down and it's automatic, each subsequent firing will interrupt the previous firing. And that works pretty good. Sometimes you have to be careful with popping, so we were. Cascading is a really complex thing that we developed, which has to do with how do you do things like multiple shell casings. If you say there's a single shell casing that hits and bounces and responds to velocity and force, which is what we have. I mean, that shell casing is an object that hits. We know how hard it hits. We know how hard the second bounce is. We know what surface it's on, and we tagged all that stuff. But if there's a whole bunch of shell casings, and you want a cacophony of shell casings or a cacophony of glass breaking and hitting, we came up with this cascading event where it will count basically the particles that are being called. So if there's only a few, it plays these set of sound tags. As soon as 6 of those are being called at once, it moves up to this next level of sound tags. And in those sound tags, the second level of sound tags, I'll have permutations that are more complex as source. They're mixed stuff. And then if there's a whole pile of stuff and it gets called 20 times at once, the third level of sound tag is the big uber cacophony. So what's nice about that is the game keeps track and it works really well. Just look at how glass breaks or gravel flies up. And there are times when just one little piece of gravel gets, clipped off and you can watch it bounce and roll and hear it. But if you explode a huge thing and there's a whole bunch of those particles, and they go behind you, it will keep track of that. But if there's a zillion of them behind you, it will play the uber big gravel sound tag. And if you have any questions about that, ask me later. Okay, a dialogue. Casting. I'm a SAG-and-AFTRA guy. I cannot imagine limiting my talent pool for a game as important as Halo. There's just no way. I'll cast anybody who's good, but over the years I've just realized that people who are in the union, they're there for a reason. They're good. One of the things I always make sure I listen for is improvisation. And if you guys don't mind, I'm probably going to go just a little long. Is that okay? I mean, if you have to leave, leave. I didn't hear any assenting voices. So one of the things I want to show is just on the casting side. There was one of the guys who is just really great. Is named Pete Stacker, and he was given a script. One of the things he had to do was say a bunch of lines after he kills an enemy. And as you can see, I think we got whatever it is here, 11, 12, whatever, a whole bunch. So this is actually a pared down bunch of his takes.
My mom thought I was going to be a doctor.
Okay, we didn't like that one, but we thought this one's good.
My mom thought I was going to be a doctor.
And then he was supposed to say,
Sit down, bitch.
whoops.
Yeah.
I don't think they made it.
Who's your daddy now, huh?
So who's your daddy? And then right after he said that, he came out with this.
I'm your daddy, but that dog beat me over the fence.
So when you hear somebody do that, you're like, oh, thank you. Because we have all these actors, they're trying to do all these lines, and then suddenly there's a great line like that. Now, that's a very rare line to hear in the game. I mean, if you hear it, has anybody heard it? Oh, excellent. Okay. And, I've heard people who've heard it and talk about break the immersion. People will, pause the game after they hear that because they're laughing. There's nothing wrong with comedy relief, right? Okay. And what I want to show really quickly, please be quickly, is, I forget the linear this AI matrix that we had for this dialogue. And there was scripted dialogue. You get here, suddenly this person says that, and this person says that. They have a conversation. That's pretty easy. That's linear. You get those two actors in the thing. And I'm going to be just a little long. Is that okay? Yeah. So you have those two actors together, and they do it, and you cut them into the game. For the AI that's fighting alongside of you, randomization, permutations, here's the inner sanctum of our sound tag, the Uber dialogue sound tag. This is the Aussies conditional sound tag. So you can see, these are the files over here that he will say when there's pain, body, minor, major, blah, blah, blah. I'm clicking down, hurt friend, hurt blah, blah, Scooby-Doo. It's too much. I'm going to kill somebody. It's so horrible to do all this work. I think there's even a flamethrower thing in here. Too bad. So let's look at the post-combat actions, like shooting a dead enemy. So if I were to open that. So this is really a nice tool. I mean, isn't this great, guys? I mean, post-combat shooting at enemy's dead body. I mean, they did that for me. So you click on that and you open it up, and this is the individual sound tag that contains permutations that represent how many of these are. It turns out to be 10 permutations. And in this particular case, number 6 happens to be...
Don't try to play get on me, pal.
There you go. So that's how that works. The Uber sound tag is the thing that put all of those things in one place. Putting it all together, here's the quick synopsis of what happened. We had to put this thing together in a very short amount of time. In June of last year, we finally heard the Xbox make a sound. In August of last year, we finally heard the beginning Xbox make sound in 5.1. It wasn't perfect. We were debugging it with our stuff. That meant we really didn't have much. It was like screaming children. I mean, everything was done at the same time. All the things were dependent. The final mix process, which I told somebody yesterday that I'd get to, that's my excuse. I'm sorry, but I think we got about 85% of the way there with the final mix as we started playing through during testing. If you guys know how it is, after you're like at 0 bugs, quote unquote 0 bugs, you're not allowed to touch stuff. And especially shipping a title like this, if I'd said, I can't hear Cortana in this one place, they're like, yeah, so what? So we did have a global ducker, which for any important dialogue, we were able to say, this is dialogue lines, duck all sound that's playing underneath it, and then come back up. And I ended up setting that at about 0.7, and I wanted to be able to go through every condition and see, you know what, I need to tweak this dialogue and this line, this line. And I think I got about 85% of the way there. It's not bad, but there are moments where it just isn't mixed well. And so on the next one, I want to do it. Seamless and element. Yeah, I'm going to just zip through this. Oh, here we go. 4,311 sound tags, which had 11,629 sound files in it. It was about 2.5 gigs uncompressed. We had some stuff at 22K mono and some stuff at 44K stereo. The music and ambience is 44K stereo, 80 PCM. I cheated on that stuff that's not positional and put music and ambience left and right, full, and 50% rears. So it's just like being in a car. If you got the 4 speakers in the car, you only got a stereo signal, you still surround yourself with the sound. I thought, well, if the ambience and the music surrounds you, and all these other things can happen all around your head in real time, that's pretty cool. Dolby 5.1 in real time. I can't emphasize this so much. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I kept talking to Brian Schmidt saying, no, tell me this again. You're saying it's encoding it in real time? Yes, it's encoding it in real time. It didn't exist yet, but he kept assuring me it was going to happen. And, it really, really works. There's no latency. It's taking, 256 possible voices or whatever it is and throwing them out there and encoding it in real time to be decoded by a 5.1 system. And it was, it really worked. That's what it did, blah, blah. What could be better? Everything that could have made a sound should have made a sound. It didn't quite. I'd like to even have more unique voices. If you played the game, you'll realize that every elite basically has the same sounds. Every grunt basically is one actor. The mix, once again. And at the end of the whole thing, I would have loved to replace. I had real strings for lots of the music, but I wasn't able to ever get to the point where I could hire the orchestra to actually sweeten up all the music in it. It was just one of those things we just didn't have time, and I don't want to use fake strings again if I can help it. We also had a problem with surround dialogue. Every once in a while, the way we had worked it was we had to put a piece of dialogue on an actor, a 3D actor, and if the camera changed position, suddenly that actor could be coming out of the rear speakers. And that is really not very good. That's pretty disconcerting. That's just not what people are used to listening to. It's cool with Marines running around you and they're behind you, and that's all neat. But if it's a scripted cutscene, it was all in-game stuff, the fact that the voices would move that violently in a cutscene was too much. And so we could have fixed it, but we didn't have time. And if we ever do another game like this, we'll fix that. Okay, all forms of entertainment are a competition, home theater systems. My philosophy is game audio is judged against all audio played on that system. We must not just meet those standards, but exceed them. And that's my goal. Thank you very much.